that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine. I gotta be honest. I'm gonna be terrible. Like I don't know what I have to contribute. I'm talking about Claw of the Conciliator, which is book 2 in Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun. Now, I'm not gonna say anything wonderful here. And by the time this video is out, you may have a video with Philip Chase and a bunch of other YouTubers. They're gonna put me to shame on this entire review. So I'm not gonna bother. I'm not topping that. I'm not topping it. There's no way. Also, there's the Ozalbo soup, which I think in this book is the first time it gets mentioned. But there's a podcast also named that, which goes way more in detail and in depth about this book than I have. Or will. But again, as with the last book, obviously if you're watching this, you've probably read the first book. We are following Severian, who is recounting his tales, because of course this is like a sort of memoir situation going on. So in present day, he is seemingly the ruler, the autarch himself. But he is giving a memoir about his past and how we got to where we are. So, and this story basically picks up immediately where the previous one left off, and it only covers a span of a couple days. And honestly, a lot happens, but also nothing happens, and everything in between happens. And there's stuff you blink and you miss it. There's stuff that I, without that podcast, would not have understood for a second what was going on. But we continue to follow Severian as he has the Claw of the Conciliator, and he's going around. He's kind of walking around for a few days, and things escalate very quickly. He devotes himself to this one man, and then also he meets back up with the play people from the first book, and also there's some weird merger of personality things going on, which I barely understood, and Severian continues to not be a very great man to the people around him. However, with that sort of weird thing that was happening, there's a bit of him changing, maybe for the better, going on here as well. So a whole bunch of world building, and I basically told you nothing because I'm terrible at this, and it was also like a month ago that I read this, and I kept pushing off making this video because I didn't know how to properly articulate things, and now it's been so long, so it's not as fresh in my mind, so I've just really botched the review. As it stands, did I enjoy it? Yes, but this is probably the densest one. It is the hardest for me to, like, there was a bunch of stuff that you blink and you miss it in the first book you could miss entirely, like the structure of the torturers that they were in being a old spaceship or whatever, which you can blink and miss, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of things in that first book that I miss that are like that without a podcast I would have completely just blazed over. But the overall main plot, I mostly was able to follow bit for bit. The things that happen in this book, they cover a way shorter amount of time, like just a few days. But within those few days, so many things happen. And for me, it was a bit hard to grasp and understand the complexities of everything going on. And when I say that, it's like not too much was actually happening, but so much was happening. And I can't directly explain that. You have to read that to understand. I will be honest, I did not particularly enjoy my time with it on my own. I would go and listen to Ozalbo Soup talk about the chapters that I had read. I would like listen to that podcast on my way to work, covering the chapters that I had already read, and I go, oh yeah, that's awesome. I understood, but while going through it, I didn't have that experience. I don't know if I'm making sense. So if you're like me and your brain's not the biggest thing in the shed, you might feel similar. That being said, once it was all explained to me through the podcast, I think it's a really good addition to the world. I think it's a really a fascinating read. I don't think I'm alone in saying this is probably people's least favorite. Not that anybody dislikes this one, but that is just the least favorite of the bunch. Um, do I recommend it? Of course I do. Gene Wolfe, somehow, he writes very short novels. These things are short, okay? I've read Star Wars books that are longer than these. I read the entire Malazan Book of the Fallen, okay? I read Prince of Nothing. Those books are longer than these books. But Gene Wolfe is probably one of the densest authors I've ever read because he packs so much in so little, and I barely understand it half the time. So, but it's a challenge, and I like to be challenged, and I still think, especially once I understand what's going on, even though I'm failing to explain any of it, that it's good. And if you like the first one, you gotta go on and keep going and read this one. Of course, if you bought the collection that's available now, you're getting the first and second book anyway, so why not read it? That being said, it's rough for me, but I do recommend it. And I was completely vague and didn't really explain anything, but that's where we are. So, I apologize if I did not do a good job. I'm gonna get into spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, there's the door. So we have Votalis and war. We were getting mentions throughout this book about a war going on. We don't particularly get to see most of that war. We see a bit of it near the end. But for the most part, the war is being talked about, but you're not seeing it. It's kind of like how in America in the 1940s during World War II, I mean, yes, we were sending soldiers out there, but in terms of American soil, that was never really an issue. So the common folk didn't get to see much of that. They probably read the news, listened to the radio. Radio existed, but yeah, I think. Anyway, point being, it wasn't on American soil, so people at that time, I mean, there was all the stuff for the Japanese internment camps, and we're not gonna get into that. Nobody was seeing guns and shooting on American soil, mostly, right? But there was talk of war all the time. And that's sort of a similar thing going on with this, and also Votalis, which was the man that Severian saved at the beginning of the first novel. We have Severian at this like sort of festival sort of thing, and he's talking to this green man, like an alien or something, I don't know, and he talks about time travel. Is he full of it? Is he actually a time traveler? No specific answers, but that's a thing. We also are getting introduced to more weird shenanigan things going on. We have man-apes, which are things that Severian comes across. We also have Severian getting a fake Thekla letter, which you would think he should know, but he goes and follows through with it anyway. My favorite part of the book, or one of my favorite parts of the book, was probably the Ganos, or what's his name? Galos. I forget how you say it, but he's sort of Severian's sort of mentor in the Torturers Guild. We get a flashback to that, and he likes to drink all the time. He gets drunk, and one of the most severe terms of punishment and torture you could get in the tower was sexual assault, and the word, you know which one. But the thing that's done so well, I think, here is his attitude. because Gallos, or however you pronounce his name, he's getting drunk. He doesn't like doing it, but he will do his duty. So he'll get himself drunk. He'll do what he has to do. He will take some sort of drug to make it. It's just a whole thing. But it's clear that he's not really comfortable with it. But he will do his duty, which Severian sees him as weak. You know, partly. And I think that entire exchange was one of the best parts of the book for me. I just thought it was really well done, and it wasn't anything that was particularly told to us. It's more so just through his reactions, through his dialogue, you can just see the discomfort with having to execute such an action. Severian meets up with Volus, the man he saved in book 1. And then we deal with the Eucharist. Now, it goes by different names, communion or whatever, in Protestant circles. Again, there's an episode by Alzobo Soup where they go over kind of all the different variation ideas of what that is. Some people with the Eucharist believe that when you drink the wine and the bread, that it literally turns into blood and flesh while you're eating it. Some people take it more of a spiritual thing, that it is when they partake of it, it becomes this spiritual thing that they're eating, that it like somehow turns into this magical thing while it's in the process. And then others believe it is just like a symbol of the past. It's a tradition, it's a ritual, but it's not actually anything supernatural. It's just a reminder. But the whole point of me mentioning this is because there's sort of an inversion of that, a sort of perversion of that in this particular section of the book that is dealt with. And also, just because I think it's fun, I'm definitely of the latter half of that it's just symbolic and a tradition. I don't believe that when I have my little disgusting wafer that's white and the grape juice, because Protestants aren't cool enough to have wine like the Catholics, that it is not actually turning into flesh and blood, because then we would all be cannibals, and I just think Jesus ain't about that. So that's my take on that. But the point is, we're getting an inversion of that in this book. And because of that inversion, we have this weird thing that happened that I completely blinked and missed and didn't understand until I listened to this podcast, which is this weird merger of Thecla's mind and Severian. So at this very moment, which again I wouldn't have understood without the podcast, is that the moment this happens, there's no longer Severian. And Thecla's already dead, right? But I guess the closest thing I could maybe compare this to that is equally weird would be Children of Dune, with the whole plot thread of Alia and the Baron Harkonnen, who was very obviously dead in the original Dune novel. And so you get a very sort of similar thing here, kind of, except it's not. In Children of Dune, it's more so like it's like this ghost, a version of Harkonnen whispering in her ear, whereas this, it's not that. It's they have joined. And so Severian and Thecla make up basically a third person that still goes by Severian, but is actively changing Severian into somebody else. So I didn't get that by just reading it. I was very lost, and that podcast really helped me. But that is what's going on. That's a very interesting thing to be going on in this book. What that implication might do for the future, I don't know. But yeah. And then later on, also Severian gets put in prison for a bit with these people. But what's kind of terrifying about it is that it's been 7 generations. I mean, it's 70 years, or no, 7 generations of people. So like, it could be even longer than that, who have never known life unshackled and out of there. He also has a friend that I didn't really mention, or it's what's his name? Was it not Jonathan? Was it? No. What's his name? How did I not write down his name? He's from the first book. We meet him in the first book. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but he's a cyborg, and or not even a cyborg. Like he's like a Terminator. Like he's actually like a robot. So I thought that was also interesting. Again, there's so much world building here. Um, yeah, but eventually Severian meets back up with the theater group, and so he's back with Dorcas, and Dorcas and Severian have a conversation, and we get to, we get to learn a little bit more about Talos, who is in the first book, and how he's a manipulator. Um, how he manipulates everyone around him, and how Severian as death don't be defined, because Talos kind of says like that's what you are death, like that was your job, that's what you do, you kill things, you end lives. And Dorcas tells Severian to not let that define him, that doesn't have to be all that you are. um, Also, Jolenta's back, and there's this weird thing. It's uncomfortable. Severian does some no things to Jolenta. I'm not very happy with that. There's a clever play chapter where we have Gene Wolfe basically completely break the structure of his novel to do something completely different during that section, and it was fun, but only in a Gene Wolfe novel where you just completely different for that section. Jolenta does eventually die. We also have Dorcas and Severian with this sort of romance that has been growing. We get some bigger implications that Talos, who we thought was kind of like the leader, right, of the whole thing, he's actually like a second in command to the other guy. And also, this is like the weird part, which is a little bit confusing, even with the podcast at the end of it all. They end up meeting the Autarch, and they're doing this play, and then during the play, the actual like soldiers from the war show up, and it's all of a hassle and a whole big thing that happens near the end. And I don't know, I don't feel really qualified to talk about this book in particular, but like I said, if it hasn't come out already, I'm sure it will be very soon, but I think it will happen way before this video comes out. For me, it's August right now. But the I'll leave a link in the description, if it's there by the time that this video comes out, of the much better discussion by Philip Chase and all those other booktubers on this book. But that's essentially it. And again, it's such a unique world. Gene Wolfe's writing is incredible. It's just so dense. Like, I cannot stress. It's so much shorter than a lot of things that I read, but it is so much more harder to fully grasp, at least for me, as someone who only has a high school diploma. I never went to college. I kind of wish I did, just for literature, not even to get a job in that, just so I could be better qualified to, every time, this is just a little personal thing, but I did this as a hobby. I did this for fun, but I understand I'm just some guy who wants to listen to some random guy discuss books when I have no right to talk about things that I don't really understand when it comes to writing and prose. And all that stuff has come from other YouTubers, like Philip Chase or A Critical Dragon and other people that have helped me better appreciate, understand these things. But I don't have any qualifications to properly tell you anything. I'm just a normal average Joe. But I do appreciate good art, and I do think this is genuinely really good art. It's just hard for my little brain to fully comprehend. But I did enjoy it, even when I was confused. I do think this series is worth your time. There's really not a lot like it, actually. It's quite fascinating. And I'm excited to read the next two. I want to see how this all concludes. Like, what is Severian doing in present day? Like, how is that all working? And I hear the next two are a bit more palatable to normies. But Cloud Conciliator, it was a good entry, despite my confusion. And I do recommend it. Although if you're this far, you've already read it. I'm sure you appreciate it. If you are smarter than me, which I'm sure you are, whoever you are that has read this book, I want to know your thoughts. Let me know what you thought about this book and the structure and how everything works. And yeah, just let's have a conversation. Tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. And until next time, I don't know. Severian needs to stop being rapey, though. That's the main thing. It's bothersome. Severian, at the very least, because of Thecla, or her personality, or clone personality, whatever it is, despite his very big flaws in this book, he is still a much better character than Callus from Prince of Nothing. Yeah. And by better character, I don't necessarily mean better written. I just mean morally wise, I think he's less bad than Callus. But I guess that's not too much of a bar, is it? Anyway, until next time, guys, I'll see you.